again, I think segment the role. If the role of the flex space and co-working space, that primary function is get people in, get them online, answer their questions, and make sure that they can get onto the system and are billing and all of like that stuff, understand how the system works. Segmenting that is done and can be automated and done in a very good way, right? Then if you're wanting to do events, or you're wanting to do programming or accelerators, or community building, any of that other stuff is really a different role. And so I think that this is always the hard part for founders that are hiring space managers or whatever, is it's like the model lets me have one person,
Yeah.
and I need this one person to do 100 things, which they may be good at some things, but probably not all things. And so, as you've talked to all these people, it's like finding a good space manager is a unicorn search, right? Like it's like almost impossible to find someone who's good. And then you better hope you can keep them forever,
Totally, which you don't. They move on, which is the other challenge of the system.
Of course they do, because they're unicorns. They're good.
Exactly. They're totally unicorns. The marketplace is demands them.
So. Yeah, totally. And so I think like that was another thing that, especially in Telluride, you spend time in Tahoe, like these mountain towns, it's impossible for people to even live up there. Like we have friends that have clothing, like retail shops up in these places, and like they're like trying to find like high school students that can like man the store so they can keep their doors open, because it's so expensive to live up there. It's really hard, where we can say we're guaranteed to be open, we're guaranteed that you can get in, like no exactly. problems, and so it goes back to the sustainability thing. And if you believe, which I do, that co-working spaces are an important amenity for your community, and that people need these locations to be able to continue working remotely, like the impact of that remote workers are having on a lot of these small communities is profound. Like there's nothing ever in the history of economic development that has had the impact that remote work does on these communities that have such high quality of life. And of course people want to live there, but they've never been able to live there because their jobs aren't there. Well, now they can take their jobs anywhere. And so it's our job to provide them with a place where they can work. I had a phone tour with a lady that works for Microsoft, and she lives in Montrose now, and it's like that could not have happened before. And so she's like, I can't, all the things. I can't work at the coffee shop, I can't do any of those things. A lot of these places, whether you're looking for community or a place outside of your house for sanity, or you don't have good internet in your community, like these are all like benefits obviously of co-working. And so it's really important that we have these locations in these communities, and we've got to do it sustainably. And so we can do all of that stuff at scale now with this kind of model, I guess.
Can you just talk, I know we talked about this last time, but a little bit about sort of your ambassador approach? We did, Giovanni and I did an interview with Marcus Jerome's. He owns Therapy Suites, and his model, I don't know if you listen to the podcast, but his model was super interesting. Also, he's got these 2,000 square foot spaces, and they serve there's a huge value to therapists, new therapists who want to go out on their own and could never get their own space. And therapists who cannot do calls at home, right, with whatever got going on at home. And he helps them kind of build their business. And I want to talk about sort of what's next for your model. He's, I think, got some similarities to yours. Like he wants to, at scale, help these folks be more successful. And then he gets these ambassadors who are local. That's like core to his success. And I was like, wow. And he, has kind of an incentive. They're not paid. So talk about how you manage that in your space, and a little bit about what that looks like and what role they play.
Yeah, so with our spaces, we do have ambassadors at the locations, which are basically, you know, members who are consistently there. And we get to give them the best part of the community manager's job, which is
Right.
just introducing them and being friendly.
Be
Like
the
that's all
mayor.
they like
Yeah.
to do anyways. And so,
Mhm.
and again, it's built in. So when you sign up, you get automated communication and introduction emails to that person and that
Oh,
ambassador and say, like,
right. Yeah.
I'd love for you to connect with them, and so again, it's built into the system. They know that they've signed up for that role. They're going to get intros, uh, introductions via text or email or whatever is best for them, and then um, they can make that connection with that person. And if they have any questions, they can answer it and stuff like that. And so, again, um, we've 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 taken on the role and responsibility of communication and questions that come up and member onboarding and management. But we still, I think the community part is really important. A lot of people are still looking for co-working spaces as a place to connect and engage with the community. And so having an appointed space ambassador at each location is really important to make sure that there is a human touch element there that can be done again at scale. And so again, I think that human touch, that connection, taking someone out to lunch for the first time or grabbing coffee with someone for the first time is really important and provides high stickiness, I think, to the community and everything. That's a part of a traditionally a co-working space manager's job, but it's a segment of their job, right? And honestly, I think
spend enough time on.
Totally. And it's the thing that I think is oftentimes the most rewarding. It's like the best part of the job. And yet it's probably the smallest percentage of the job that they get to do all the time. And so for us, a space ambassador, it's like, hey, we're going to give you a discounted membership or a free membership for just the best part of the job. And you don't have to worry about anything else. If there's any other questions, if you need anything, send them back to us, And so that is really kind of how that space ambassador works.
Yeah. I love that because I was just thinking, going back to there's lots of spaces who probably aren't even introduced. If you don't do an in-person onboarding meeting when someone joins, you're getting emails from the community manager, but you may never actually formally get introduced. Hey, this is Kristen. She's here to help you get integrated if you want, right? We're not going to force fun, but yeah, even that's a good system to have in place that most spaces probably aren't doing. I joined a local space and there are two community managers. So one of them did the onboarding meeting. The other one I had never met. And so I was in the space one day and she thought I was a guest because we just hadn't connected and probably no one. And so when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, that's really interesting. Cause even having those systems, how do you make sure everybody knows who's new and that's automated and there's that direct connection made? People should probably be doing that anyway and likely aren't. So yeah, that's very cool. And it's a lift. I'm always very anxious when people talk about ambassadors. It's well, you cannot make them log into all the systems. It's but if you're only asking them to do the really fun part, that could be really rewarding.
It's just an intro, and I think you can play with things. We could load maybe they get a discount, or you have a budget, a coffee budget that you load a loaded card or whatever, and it's like, go to coffee and I'll buy you both coffee or whatever. Or we've done things with ambassadors where it's like, I'll give you $100 if you want to just take people out for happy hour beers or whatever. It's on us. And so I think the ambassador has to be it's like a space manager, right? It's you have to select the right person that understands what you're trying to accomplish, that is extroverted and recharged by being with people and connecting with people and stuff like that. But every space has those people. Every space also has people that are like, I don't want to do any of that, right? Yeah. And so you have to find the right person. But I think, when you find the right person, they're probably going to be doing that stuff anyways, right?
Totally.
So,
like they're the natural role they take on. Yep. So
yep.
recognize them. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yep. And again, it's like if that person has those attributes, inherently, and all they have to do is like meet new friends, which is like who you're ambassador, like that's who they are. It's like, oh, a new friend. So just worry about that and tell them about the fun things that you're doing or invite them out somewhere or whatever, and then don't worry about anything else. Like all the other logistics,
Right.
we'll take care of.
Do you think the ambassador is a critical part of making the model work, or do you think a space could be automated but ambassadorless?
It depends on how you measure success, Jamie. So I think, I think a space can exist and be ambassadorless, but it's definitely an amenity that you're going to miss out on, if that makes sense. So, because it's a component, right? Like I think when people connect with the ambassadors or whatever, there's just a whole another level of kind of that hospitality and touch that is really important, that I think is hard to scale without that component.
Yeah. I think your segment of people are smaller that would want a space that's like totally doesn't have that layer.
Totally. Well, and I think
you just have to know, right? Like, what's your why and what do you want to get out of this?
Getting into it.
Yeah. And have you confirmed there's a segment of people in your market that would buy that?
Totally. I know that you work with a lot of commercial real estate flex people, and I think so that's really kind of, I think there's really kind of two benefits that we're providing and offering and talking to other, operators about is kind of automating all this stuff is really important. It's going to save you time and money. And then the other is this kind of like turnkey co-working brand thing that you can just kind of plug into the system. So if you have a commercial building owner that wants that co-working or flex amenity built in, we can provide all the branding turnkey, almost franchise light, right? Yep. Everything is done.
Not a very sexy way to say it, but that's
what it is.
Let us do it for you.
All the branding, all the technology is taken care of, all the hardware is taken care of, and the onboarding and management. So it's like kind of ready to go, right? And so, and I think for a lot of people that is a compelling offer. Again, if you're wanting these other things, just like if you're wanting to do events, if you're wanting to do programming, then you'll probably need an additional person.
You have to identify somebody who could be in charge of that aspect. Also not impossible.
Correct.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. So if you, say a landlord's like, you know what, I have 5,000 feet and I want to like make this an amenity. I want to plug and play. How do you identify an ambassador in a community that you are not connected to? Do you like what it feels like a chicken or egg thing here?
Totally. I mean, if it was like a place completely out of where we reside or whatever, you'd really want to work with the boots on the ground there, whether it's the building owner or whatever, and try to figure out who is that person.
Who, like gets it and can help you recruit that person. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So is this a model you're pursuing? Tell us what's next for AltSpace?
Yeah. So I think this is a model that we're pursuing, is offering kind of this turnkey virtual management solution for people. We're talking to a lot of people that are, I think, kind of the different personas I think that we're talking to are either I'm an existing operator and I'm either doing everything myself and don't want to anymore, or, asking myself, I've talked to a lot of people who started their space. They really appreciate their space. They don't want to lose their space. but they're interested in pursuing other things, or are just, don't necessarily want to be the one managing it all the time, but don't want it to go away. And so for those people, it's like, sweet, we can help you with that. We can let you kind of keep the wheels on the bus, keep the thing going. We'll take over all the onboarding and management and all of that stuff for you. So that's kind of, customer number one. And then customer number two is, that property owner who's looking at having the amenity in their space. Again, they don't want to be the ones to do it. They're trying to remodel their commercial building or do any of that stuff. They want to plug and play a turnkey solution. And again, I think when you look at some of the other options out there as far as co-working franchises, it's like very expensive, very big, long commitment, and in which you cannot get out of. You're contractually obligated to
I had that conversation with the asset owner.
So,
you can't right.
So
it's like forever.
It's like, oh, we could just plug you in and and have it kind of, all the systems are built. They don't have to worry about anything. So that's kind of the second. And then I think the other one is really looking at folks who are managing multiple locations and are either trying to figure out how to become more efficient. I got to get my business more efficient. I'm doing all this work. And when I get to the end of the month, what am I doing it for? And so by working with us, we can build a lot more efficiency into your business by saving you time, money, and taking a lot of kind of the obligation that you're dealing with all the time off of your shoulders. And so whether that's, pairing us up with your team and making your team more efficient, again, like if you were having, hypothetically, if you've got 5 locations and you've got a team of 5 or 6 or whatever that we talk to a lot of times, we could probably get all the same work done. And if you were looking at downsizing or anything like that, we can keep everything moving forward with a leaner team. And I don't think the experience will be worse, right? I think, again, as we talked about, by building in this automation, it's the end user is going to have the same or better experience across the board, 100% of them all the time. And you don't have to worry about, what if I lose Jamie on my team, or what if I lose whatever, because we're investing in systems that are going to be sustainable. Or the kind of last one is teams that are wanting to expand their footprint. So I think there's a lot of people that have one co-working space or 2, and there's opportunities that they could grab more in the region, but they don't really have the capacity to manage or operate all of them because they're too far away or whatever. We can work with them to increase their capacity of their team. And so then they can become kind of like a regional brand, whereas before they didn't have the ability to do that. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. My wheels are turning. So wait, customer number 2, the landlord. How do you handle customer acquisition in that case? How do you get members? Do you guys do that, or is that still like,
so I think that's a little TBD. So we do stuff like, we'll work with them. We're building out their Google My Business page. Every one of our locations has their own landing page with all of that information. They're being added to the newsletter. We're helping with a lot of that stuff. I would still say, just like in a franchise, you still have a responsibility to do marketing, right? And so the way that we're billing and everything like that is really being paid for the member onboarding and ongoing management. So it's really managing what is already inbound. If you wanted to expand on all the marketing and driving traffic into your space and stuff like that, you need to invest in that stuff. So whether we helped you do it or you did it yourself, you can't just.
The sales funnel, I mean, that's really top of funnel, right? So you're still handling a lot of the automation for the rest of the sales funnel, which is critical, because the top of the funnel is one thing. It's the rest of the funnel that often has a lot of leaks. And so you're really automating a lot of that.
Yeah. And being able to do it in a very efficient, a capital efficient way, basically.
Okay. Super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're up to a lot of things that make a lot of sense. And I think that's one of the reasons, I mean, you've been doing this for a while, proximity and now alt space, like that people stay in the industry because there's like, we're still evolving and learning and thinking about how to evolve the model to work for different. Yeah.
Totally. And I think, the other thing is we're building out kind of our alt space footprint in Colorado. So again, that's really nice too, because as we're adding more locations, it's increasing the value of the brand, right? And so people can travel seamlessly, and we have complete control over the hardware and software that's getting used, which means we have complete control over the end user experience and how to do all that stuff. I think, there's been a lot of different folks who have tried, like we tried the Nomad Pass at proximity or whatever, and I think it was just always hard because everyone had a different system.
In reality, the logistics, it's like, well, it's sort of helpful. It facilitates, it helps you find.
Everyone has to be on the same system. You have to
but so that means you spec this, like the end user has to adopt your hardware, all of it. Like you have to opt into this. That's the way this works.
Yeah. Otherwise,
you're running going to be consistent on a bunch of different. Yep.
And so I think that that's really important too, is we've really standardized. Here's what you need, and that's why we can have it turnkey and say, like, these are the things that we need. This is how the system works. This is how the automation works, is because we're all on the same system. And it's because we're on the same system, what that translates to is a better UI for the end user, and I think, I know we're kind of like running out of time, but I think what we've seen is if we zoom out, and even stop talking about co-working in general, like, at a macro perspective of things, there's going to be more automation in the market, as we move forward. And so I think, people are more used to that. A lot of the software that has been developed over the last decade, whether it's Box or Office R&D or whoever, fill in the blank, was really built to make managing the space really efficient, but it wasn't built for talking directly with the customer. And you helped automate kind of the space manager's job, and then it was their job to deal with the customer and figure out all the complicated things or whatever. Now, what we're able to do now with all these automation tools is just go use those tools and then work directly with the customer to kind of circumvent all that other stuff, right? And so I think by doing that, that creates a bunch of opportunity for efficiency within the business, efficiency with how capital is spent, efficiency with, how we're communicating with the end user. We're starting to, there's all sorts of AI tools that are coming out that now I don't have to work with you just with email, but can do email or text messaging or chatbot or like whatever communication works best for you. We can do all that for the end user. And so I don't know. I think it is really important. I think you're hearing that a lot of people are trying to figure out the model because the model is becoming more and more lean and will continue to do so as prices get more expensive for things, And so I think this was a model that we came up with out of COVID, basically because we had to. We didn't have really any other options. But I think by going all in on it and committing to it, I think what we've been able to do is be kind of in a blue ocean and being working in a model that has a lot of advantages. Obviously, there's trade-offs to some of those things, but we found that the trade-offs that we've made have created a positive outcome for us and is going to allow us to do this work for a really long time in a way that is sustainable. And that is ultimately what is most important to us and will allow us to have what we believe is greater impact on these things.
I think that's a perfect way to end. I have a million questions I could keep going, but yes, I have to let you go. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for doing what you're doing. If people want to learn more about getting involved, if they fall into one of your customer buckets, what's the best way?
Check us out. It's altspacecowork.com. Go there. If you're interested in the automation, there's a little tab at the top that says co-working automation services. So just click that, fill out the form, and we'd be happy to get in touch with you.
Okay, perfect. And we'll put the link in the show notes. And if you're listening on your phone, you can click and get to the show notes. I like to remind people of that because it's so easy versus having to remember to do it when you get back to your computer. Brian, thank you. And until next time.
All right. Thanks, Jamie.